Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. We're going to get started here. We're here at Simple Citizen headquarters in Salt Lake City, Utah. And today we're going to be talking about how to get a green card. And we'll be going back and forth between video and the slide deck. My name is Matthew, and we have Jacob Sapochnick on here as well. And give me just a second. I'm going to switch over to the slide deck. Yes. Okay. So my name is Matthew Gale, and I'm the VP of Community here at Simple Citizen. And I'm here with Jacob Sapochnick, who is he's a renowned immigration attorney based out of San Diego. And,
can you hear me, guys?
Oh, I can hear you, Jacob.
Perfect. Welcome.
So the way I'm thinking this can work is we can go through the slides and feel free to interject at any time. Does that sound good?
Yeah, excellent.
Okay, you want to give a couple-minute introduction?
Sure. So I'm an attorney based in San Diego, California. We are a full-service law firm working with all aspects of immigration law. And we are working closely with Simple Citizen to make sure that software is always being improved and make sure the customers that are using the system are getting the best service with the least mistakes. Right now, immigration service has been very, very tough, and there's a lot of issues. People are facing delays, and we want to make sure that people understand what they have to do, how to do it, and what's going to happen next. So we're excited to dive right in.
Awesome. Thanks, Jacob. So like I said, I'm Matthew Gale, and I'm the VP of Community here at Simple Citizen. And let's get started. So here's Jacob's website. And you can see on his website, it's h1b.biz, lots of great resources. Maybe, Jacob, just for a couple of seconds, you could talk about some of the resources that you have on your website.
Sure. So, we have we give a lot of information. So we have in the services part, you can see all the different things that we do, and there's a lot of articles that explain that. We have a podcast called Ask an Immigration Lawyer, where people can actually post questions, and we will answer them on video and on audio. We try to update the processing times of different resources. And of course, we have a lot of videos. We have one of the largest video libraries out there. So we try to post video every week about different changes and about different topics in immigration law. And also there's a link to our different apps that we have on iTunes, as well as the book that I've written. It's available on Amazon. So if you scroll through the website, there's a lot of resources, all from family immigration to business immigration to startup immigration. So we try to keep up with updates and putting more and more content on that website.
Great. Thanks, Jacob. Okay, here's our website, simplecitizen.com. So we are a self-service immigration website. So sort of like TurboTax, but for immigration paperwork. We do green cards, green card renewals, citizenship, and several different visas. On our website, we also have a blog where we have lots of content to answer different questions that can help you through the immigration process, whether that's getting your F1 student visa or getting whatever visa you're applying for, then getting your green card, renewing that green card, removing the conditions, and eventually applying for citizenship. So that website is learn.simplecitizen.com, or you can click up above at the Learning Center. So first, let's talk about who's eligible for lawful permanent residency, or who's eligible to be a green card holder. And Jacob, like I said earlier, feel free to interject at any moment.
Of course.
So first, you can immigrate to the United States through family. So this is mostly immediate family relatives, like a spouse, a parent, a child, and then a sibling. We'll talk about the difference between those categories here in a minute. The second category through which you can immigrate to the United States or reside here permanently is through employment. You have to have an employer who is willing to sponsor you, and you have to go through you have to go through a process in order to eventually get the green card. And then the third main option is through investment. So you can invest around $500,000 and you can eventually get a green card. There's some other categories like a victim of a qualifying crime or refugee or asylum. But today we're mostly going to talk about family immigration, and we'll talk a little bit about employment immigration.
Right. And there's another option that is available through the green card lottery, which is still available today. I mean, they're talking about canceling it, but we still have the visa lottery, which is a separate category for people who can immigrate. But we're not focusing on that today.
Yeah, but that is an option out there for anyone interested. And at the end, we'll do Q&A, and we're happy to answer questions about any of these categories. We're just going to focus the slides and the presentation mostly on family immigration.
Yeah.
Okay, so the first way, we're first going to talk about concurrent filing, which means it's like the best category through which you can immigrate to the United States through family. And so these are immediate family relationships, like a spouse, a parent, or a child who is over 21 who can sponsor that parent. And so what concurrent filing means is if you're living in the United States currently, or if you've come here to visit and you've married, or you are visiting a child here who is over 21, or you are visiting a parent and you are under 21 and not married, then you can file all of your paperwork immediately. So that means you don't have to file the initial petition, which is the I-130, which we'll talk about here in a minute. You can file that petition along with all of the other paperwork at the exact same time. And so the process is much quicker for those immediate categories. And then there are also some employment-based petitions that if the visa number is immediately available, with which you can file concurrently.
Right. And I think the distinction that we're trying to point here is that we're also talking about people that are currently inside the U.S. Those are going to be doing what is called an adjustment of status, as opposed to people that are not here. And so all these people that Matt just mentioned are able to file concurrently because they're inside the U.S., going to be doing adjustment of status.
If you're outside the U.S., you have to go through another process, which is called concurrent filing, which I will talk about a little bit here in the future. So here are the different categories for family immigration. So we first talked about spouse, a minor child who is unmarried, and a parent, which those are the first category, which you can file everything immediately if you're in the United States. If you're out of the United States, everything is processed pretty quickly as well. But if you don't fall in one of those categories, then you will fall in one of these categories. The first is F1, which is an unmarried son or daughter of a U.S. citizen who is over 21. And you can see the processing time for that is about 6 years. So that means you file the initial petition, which is the I-130, and it takes 6 years for the I-130 to be approved, and then you can go through the rest of the process to immigrate permanently. The second category is F2A, which is spouses and children of permanent residents, and this currently is taking about 15 months. And so if you're out of the country, you file the I-130, and then after 15 months, you're able to go through the rest of the process. Or if you're in the country and you have a valid visa, you can wait those 15 months. And then, like Jacob said, you can do an adjustment of status application. Right. You also have the F2B category, which is unmarried sons and daughters who are 21 years or older of permanent residents. And that takes 6.5 years currently. You have F3, which is married sons and daughters of U.S. citizens, and that is taking 12 years. And then you have F4, which are brothers and sisters of U.S. citizens, which takes about 13 years currently. Do you have anything to add here, Jacob?
Right. So one of the things that people are concerned right now is that with some of the proposals, they may want to eliminate something like category F4, which is basically brothers and sisters, and also people that are concerned about they take so long to file for sibling, 13 years and up in most countries, and sometimes in for Mexicans and Philippines, it's even more than 20 years. people they don't start the process because, oh, it's going to take too long. So, we always recommend you just do it now. And then by the time you think about it, it's already 5 years past, 6 years past. It's really important to do so. And also people that are, category F2B, there's a lot of consideration for people whether they should get married or not, because the processing time will take longer if they get married. So those are considerations that people have, and they should be aware of as they take those steps, which are normal steps in life. They can affect your immigration process long term.
Great. Thanks, Jacob. Okay, so what exactly is lawful permanent residency? For anyone who doesn't know what exactly that means and what the benefits are, a lawful permanent resident or a green card holder are non-U.S. citizens who can permanently reside in the U.S. And some of the benefits of being a green card holder include work authorization without restrictions. So you get, when you first file, it takes about 3 to 4 months to get an EAD card, and you can work with that card. And then once you get the green card, you can work with the green card without restrictions. You also have the right to own property. You have the ability to apply for financial assistance for education. And you can also join the armed forces, and you're eligible for citizenship.
One thing I want to add, Matt, is that people, when they become green card holders, some people don't understand that a green card is not a permanent right to have it, which means that while you can live here for 10 years at a time and renew it, if you commit certain crimes, if you abandon your U.S. residency and you leave for a while and come back, you may lose the green card. And so the green card, while it's permanent, I mean, you don't have to get a visa, you can renew it every 10 years. There are some things that you do that may jeopardize your green card and cause you to lose it. And if you lose your green card, you may end up being deported or barred from coming back to the U.S. Therefore, we always tell people, once you have a green card for 5 years at a minimum, consider becoming a U.S. citizen, because once you're a citizen, it's almost impossible to lose it.
Great. Thanks, Jacob. Okay, so what exactly does the process look like to apply for a green card? First, you have the USCIS forms. So these are all of the forms required to submit the paperwork and to apply for the certain status you're applying for. So we're mostly going to talk about the main forms, which we mentioned a little bit before, the I-130 and the I-45. And then we'll talk about some of the supporting forms, like the I-765, which is work authorization, the I-131, which is travel. It's a travel permit. And then the I-864, which is a financial document. It's the affidavit of support. And we'll talk about the G-1145, which is a email and text notification. So once you get all of those forms, you would need to add supporting documents to each form. So that could include passport, birth certificate, divorce decree, all of these different supporting documents that show that you're eligible to actually get a green card. And then you include the checks, which you're going to send into the USCIS, along with the signatures that you're going to put in the different forms, and then you'll mail it into the USCIS. So now we'll talk about the different forms and what some of the supporting documents are for those forms and the purpose of each form. So this is what the end product looks like when you do it through Simple Citizen. So we include instructions, we include the envelope you use to send it into the USCIS with the address. Not everyone sends it into the same address. We'll talk a little bit about the differences and how you decide which address you're going to send it to. And then you can see all the forms behind our instructions there. We also put little sticky notes on exactly where you should sign the documents. Okay, so the first form that we include in the green card application is the G1145. So I briefly talked about this. It's the e-notification form. It's just a one-page form, and it's so that you get email and text notifications as your status changes and is updated with the USCIS. So it can be filled out by anyone for any application they're applying for. So if you're just sending in the I-130 petition, you could fill out this form so you get updates. And so that would be the U.S. citizen filling out the form. Or if it's for the I-45, then you can also fill out this form and include it with the I-45. So then the immigrant would be filling it out. And you can get the latest form on uscis.gov. That's where you're getting all the latest forms. when you're sending in these forms, make sure you're sending in the most up-to-date form. Otherwise, the USCIS will send it back and say you need to fill it out with a new form. So the second form that is included in the green card application is the I-130, which is the petition for an alien relative. So basically what that means is I'm a US citizen. So my wife, she's from Costa Rica. So if I were to fill out this form, it would mean that either she's residing in the US and I want her to remain here and be eligible to apply for a green card, or she's living outside of the US and I want her to be able to come to the US and reside here permanently. So US citizens are filling this out, and it's to petition whomever they would like to come to the US. So if that's a sibling or a parent or a child, you need to fill out this form and say, this is my immigrant relative whom I want to come to the US. And you give some background information about yourself, about the US citizen, and then at the end you cite it and send it in. So Jacob talked about adjustment of status application while you're based here in the US. If you're based in the US and you fall in that first preference category, like spouse of a US citizen or parent of a US citizen, then you file the I-130 together with all the other forms. You don't need to file the I-130, wait for its approval, and then submit all the other forms.
Right.
So the way it works with the I-130 is you send it in, and then you have to wait with those preferences we were showing before. You know, if it's 7 years or 6 years or 14 months, you send in the I-130, you wait those 14 months, and they assign you a priority date. And so you continue to check the USCIS website until that priority date is current. And we'll show the URL for that website so you can continue to go to that website. So if my wife were to petition her mom, who lives in Costa Rica currently, then we would wait until the I-130 is approved. And then once it's approved, we would go through the rest of the process. And that, because she falls in that first category, it would be pretty quick. But if she were to petition her brother, then it would take those 13 years or whatever for the priority date to become current.
Right. And you know, the I-130 form is one of the most important documents in this whole family petition, whether you do it for a spouse or for a sibling or a parent, because the I-130 sets the foundation for everything that goes afterwards. So if it's an immediate visa, or for example, for a spouse, and they are in the US, obviously the I-130 will be the main form and everything else will come with it. But any mistakes on that form could kind of snowball on creating issues down the road. That's why it's important to do it correctly. Make sure that the right category is checked, but also make sure that when the form is completed, there's an indication whether the person is in the US or outside of the US. Because if the person is in the US and the form is filled as if they are not in the US, it can create all kind of complications down the road. So it's very important this form to complete correctly, because every form has to be done correctly. But the I-130 and the 45 that we're going to talk about soon are the most important forms and must be done very carefully.
Great, thanks, Jacob. Okay, so here's some of the supporting documents for the I-130. If you need to include any addendums or provide any additional information, you want to include that right after the form. So you're required to submit 5 years of address history. If you've moved around a lot in those 5 years, then there isn't enough space on the actual form to fill out that information. So the way our software does it is we create an addendum, and we create a table that shows all of the additional addresses and the dates for those addresses. You can also provide it in the additional information at the very end of the form. You should also include the petitioner's birth certificate. So the petitioner is the US citizen, and they're called the petitioner because this is a petition and they're petitioning it. So they should submit their birth certificate to show that they are eligible to bring their relative here to the US because they're US citizens. They should also submit their passport, and sometimes people don't have a birth certificate. And so I don't know, Jacob, do you know if the USCIS will only accept a passport, or do they need the birth certificate?
So typically in family petitions, they want to see the birth certificate, and it's important to try to get it. Now, there are some requests for evidence that we've been seeing that they had issues with the kind of birth certificates that the applicants were providing, and then I guess we have to deal with it on a case-by-case basis. But it is important to have a birth certificate. They won't process a file just with a passport.
So of this list, what would you say is absolutely required, and what would you say just adds to the case and makes it so you can avoid a request for evidence?
That's a good question. So birth certificates are a must. A passport is a must. We don't need a driver license. A marriage certificate is a must. We don't necessarily need evidence of the wedding at the early stages. We don't need evidence of joint ownership and lease or financial supporting. You can do it in the beginning, but it's not a must. They won't deny the case if you don't have it. Joint assets and commingling, it's not required to submit all of it in the beginning, but you need to have the documents for the support we'll get to during that 45 for the support documents. But here, if you have those documents handy, you can provide a kind of like almost like a summary of those documents, but it's not necessary. But
okay.
The must is the birth certificates, the marriage certificate, the passports, and the information on the form. That is key.
Great. And then the additional documents just add to the case.
Correct.
Okay, so the I-130A. This is a new form, and it is, if you're married to a U.S. citizen, then you fill out this form. It's only for spouses of U.S. citizens. And it's basically to get some background information on the spouse, where their physical address, where they've lived in the past. And it's a short form, and it's just adding to the I-130. So the immigrant is the person filling this out, and they should sign it, and all of the supporting documents should be their documents. So you include their birth certificate, their passport, and U.S. visa, their I-94, and then if they have employment authorization, you can include that too. But for the documents they must include, Jacob, are the birth certificate, the passport, and the visa, right?
Correct, exactly.
And the I-94.
Of course, yeah. To show that proof they entered legally. Yeah.
Great. Okay, here's the I-45. This is the form that is allowing you to apply for a green card. So you first submit the I-130, the I-130A. Those are the petitions. Then the petition is approved, and that's when you submit the I-45. This is if you're currently living in the United States. If you're outside of the United States, then you need to go through a process called consular processing. We're not going to talk much about consular processing, but if you have questions at the end of the webinar, we're happy to address some of those questions about consular processing. So the I-45 is to get background information on the immigrant so that the USCIS, which is the U.S. Department of Immigration and Citizenship, sees that the immigrant is eligible for a green card. So again, make sure you have the most up-to-date form, and you can find that on uscis.gov. Here are the supporting documents. Again, the marriage certificate, the birth certificate, the U.S. visa for the immigrant, the passport, the I-94, which, like Jacob said, it's the form that shows you had valid entry into the United States and you're eligible, or you're allowed to stay up until a certain date. You can access that on the Department of State's website. And then you can add some of these additional documents that aren't necessary, like the applicant's driver's license, the petitioner's driver's license. The petitioner should also include their birth certificate and their passport.
Yeah, and then one important document that should come on the 45, and again, it's not applicable to all people that file this, but for example, let's say you had a criminal background and you had a conviction or something. There's a question that asks that, so it's important to add that with your form I-45. Any criminal resolutions should be added to your file at time of filing.
Great, thanks, Jacob. Yeah, so like Jacob said, there's a series of questions that determines eligibility. Some of those questions are, have you overstayed or have you violated the terms of your immigrant status? And if you overstayed your visa, then you have violated those terms. You have to check yes, and then you have to give some background. So the way that our software does it is you check yes, and then you give a brief explanation. I overstayed my visa because I was visiting the US, and turns out I met my spouse, we fell in love, we got married. In a spousal petition, these things are forgiven instantly, and it isn't that big of a deal if you've worked without authorization or if you've overstayed your I-94 admit until date because you're married to a U.S. citizen. In other applications, it's a different story, right, Jacob?
So it's it's one of those things where it's important to be kind of focused on a particular case, right? So in this case, let's give an example of somebody who was filing and they have documents that are not clear, right? So they have to kind of provide an explanation as to why it's not matching to the common, right? The common documents they want to see.
Great. And the way our software does that is, like I've said previously, we create addendums and we give the description and some of the evidence. There is also additional information where you can provide some of that evidence and details there. The next form is the I-765. It's the employment authorization form. So if you want to be eligible to work in the US, then you should fill out this form. It asks some basic information. If you've applied for a EAD card, or employment authorization document, if you've applied for one before, it asks your country of citizenship, where you were born. If you're single, it asks what eligibility you're applying under. And then a new thing that they just recently added is it asks for your social security number, and if you have been issued a social security number previously. If you have not, this form will also allow you to be issued a social security number and card.
Right. And I should add one more thing, Matt. Yeah. So typically it takes about 90 days to get that card on average processing. So it's, typically people file this, they file it at the same time as the other documents. However, sometimes people need to get it sooner for whatever reason. And so there are reasons like emergency that people can try to expedite the issuance of the card, and it's on a case-by-case basis, but it's something that is possible to do after filing.
Great, thanks, Jacob. So the supporting documents, similar to the ones in previous forms, the applicant's U.S. visa, their passport, their I-94, and if they have had a EAD card previously, they should include that here. Okay, the next document is the I-131. So this is the travel permit, and it also serves a few other purposes. It could be the if you need to apply for advanced parole, it can be that. If you need to apply for the re-entry permit, it can be that as well. For the green card purpose, it is the advanced parole document. So what that means is while you're waiting for your green card to process, which currently, depending on where you live, can take around a year, you can get this, you can fill out this form, and then you're eligible to travel once you get the EAD card. So it'll be your employment authorization card, but then on the bottom, it will say valid for advanced parole. And then when you leave and re-enter the country, you can use that document along with your passport. So you no longer need to use a visa because your status is I-45 pending, which basically means you're waiting for the green card. Keep in mind when you travel with the EAD advanced parole document, then you will most likely go through extra secondary inspection. That's correct, right, Jacob?
Yeah. And one thing is important to say, Matt, is that while this is a document that issued and people have it, immigration are always in a position that it's not a guarantee for reentry. So just like you said, they will be pulled over for secondary inspection. They'll be asking them questions. Where did you go and why did you go? And so, of course, most cases they will let the person in, but it's not a guarantee. So we always tell people, don't travel unless you really have to, because they don't, if there's a reason for them to suspect something is going on, they don't have to let you in. Because remember, this is a discretionary right. So we always say keep it for necessary travel only, if possible.
Great, thanks, Jacob. So you should include as supporting documents the applicant's, so when I'm saying applicant here, I'm referring to the immigrant, the applicant's U.S. visa, their passport, their I-94, and their employment authorization card if they've had it previously. This form, the I-693, is the medical examination form. It's basically giving medical background on the immigrant. You have to go to a specific doctor, that you'll find on the USCIS website, and they call them a civil surgeon. And you'll go and to this doctor's appointment, they'll ask about which vaccinations you've received, some of your medical background, and then they'll fill this out. They'll put it in a sealed envelope. You actually have to go to 2 different appointments, and you might have to get several vaccinations. And then they'll put it in a sealed envelope, and do not open this envelope. And you'll include that envelope in the initial packet you send to the USCIS, or you can send it in a little bit later, or you can bring it to your interview. Keep in mind that this sealed envelope is valid only for a year. And so it needs to be valid up until the time of the interview. So as green card processing is currently taking about a year, you might want to send this in a little bit after sending in all your documents, or bring it into your interview.
That's good. And also, it's important to go through only to a licensed USCIS surgeon, because if you go to an alternative option, it may delay the process.
Great, thanks, Jacob. So now we're going to show what an actual green card looks like, and how you should prepare it and put it together. So I'm going to open up the webcam now. Okay. Hello, everyone. Okay, so I actually have mine and my wife's green card application here. This is what it looks like. So this is how we prepare it. You can see right here we have a cover letter. It tells the USCIS officer all of the documents and forms that are included in this application. This cover letter is 2 pages. It's addressed to the USCIS officer. We're sending it to the lockbox in Chicago, so we have the address right there. The way that we do it here at Simple Citizen is we hole punch right here, and then we put these Arco fasteners in here. So you can see it's pretty thick, and this is, I'd say, a medium-sized green card. And so this is the best way that we've found to prepare them, is using these Arco fasteners. You can also use folders, and you can hole punch that. You can see we have all the different forms here. So here's the G1145. We also have the I-130 right here, and then we have all the supporting documents that go with it. So the I-130 has all been filled out by the software. The nice thing about using Simple Citizen is there's a lot of duplicate information in these forms. And so when you use Simple Citizen, it fills everything out instantly, makes the process much quicker. And then you don't have to fax things in. You can actually just take a picture with your phone for your supporting documents, and you could upload that to the software. We'll print it out and send it to you. So you can see I've included my birth certificate right here. I have my passport and all the other supporting documents that we've talked about. So in here, we actually included some of our marriage evidence. So you can see right here, we have our joint insurance documents with Geico. We also included our lease. We also included a bunch of photos. There's a photo from our wedding. And just to show the USCIS officer that our marriage is legitimate. After the I-130, we have the I-130A. You can see right there, we filled that out, added the supporting documents, and then we have the I-45 with all the supporting documents, and then we have the I-864, which is the affidavit of support. It's the document that you use to show, to get a financial sponsor. And so a financial sponsor should make 125% of the federal poverty line, which for 2 people is about $21,000. And to show that income, they should include pay stubs, tax documents, W-2s, all of that. So we also include a envelope with the address where you should send in the green card form or whatever form you're filing. And we include a sample check. So that will show you exactly what the check should look like. U.S. Department of Homeland Security, the amount, the immigrant's full name with the form you're using. And then you should include a passport photo. So we include instructions on all that. And then we also include a packet like this that explains very clearly how you should do everything.
And what is important, Matt, about doing it this way is that the immigration officers are bombarded with thousands of applications. And if they get something clear and organized in that way, it makes their life so much easier. Like, we meet, I go to conferences, 6-7 times a year, and we meet our partners in the immigration service, and they keep telling us, listen, when we get a package that is organized, that's brightening our day, because they know that it's going to be faster for them to find what they need, process the file, and move on to the next one, which is going to be much more messier and less organized. So yeah, following a clear path with organized documents in that kind of order is going to increase the chances of approval tremendously.
Great, thanks, Jacob. So quickly, we're going to go over the last couple slides that we have here that tell you how to pay the government fees, what the cost is, and then how we do an attorney review here at Simple Citizen, and then also where you should mail it. And then we'll finish up with a Q&A. So I'm going to screen share again. Okay, so here are the fees for the different forms. The I-130 is $535. The I-45 is $1,140. With the I-45, depending on your age, you need to pay a biometric service fee of $85. When you're submitting all of those forms together, the I-765 and the I-131 fee is waived. Here's about how the check should look. You should put U.S. Department of Homeland Security, the amount, the immigrant's name, and then the form in the memo line. Briefly, we'll talk about fee waivers. If you fall under the federal poverty line and you have a means-tested benefit like food stamps or something like that, or you're experiencing financial hardship, then you're able to submit a fee waiver. So you don't have to pay some of the USCIS fees. So the way that we do it here at Simple Citizen, we charge $250 for preparing the whole application, what the software does, and then we charge an extra $100 if the customers want an attorney review. And then basically what the attorney review does is the application is reviewed by a professional immigration attorney at Jacob's office, actually, and the feature is an option that is available for every application through Simple Citizen. The step ensures that the application is 100% correct and it's ready to be sent to the USCIS. So we've processed over 3,000 applications and we have 100% approval by the USCIS. We've never had a rejection. And I think when people fill out the application on their own, it's about a 30% chance of rejection or request for evidence. So it's good to go through an attorney and have it reviewed. So to mail the green card application, if you're filing everything at the same time, you're filing concurrently, like we talked about in the beginning, you send it into the lockbox in Chicago. If you're just submitting the I-130, you either send it to Chicago or you send it to Phoenix, and that's based on your address. If you just go to the I-130 website, you'll know it shows where you're living and where you should send it. So here are the URLs you should use to check processing times and the visa bulletin for the USCIS. So if I click right here, I can check the most recent visa bulletin for February 2018. And this will allow me to see when the priority date is being processed. So if I look right here, if I'm F1 category, then if I have a priority date of January 1st, 2012, I can start the rest of the application. If I click here, I can see how long the processing times are taking once I've already submitted an application. So if I were to check the processing time on mine and my wife's application, I would go to Salt Lake City, Utah. I would click the field office. We submitted an I-45. So they're processing from March 13th, 2017. So I have to wait about a year. And then we have another URL here for a case status tracker. So this is on our website, and you can put your USCIS case number that they assign and send to you in the mail, and it will tell you when it will give any updates to your application. So those can be text and email updates letting you know, oh, it's been processed and they're ready to schedule an interview. So I think now, Jacob, if you don't have anything to add, we'll open it up to Q&A.
Hey, I just want to add one thing. When you mentioned about the percentage of people who are not going through the software and the attorney review, it's not just about the rejection. Sometimes, when you put wrong information and it stays there, years later when they find out and they see that information and you need to try to explain why it happened, it can actually backfire. So it's not just about getting rejected, but it's also making sure that whatever you give the government is correct, because it can be used against you one day. And if you say, well, I didn't mean to do it, it may not be enough of an excuse. So, we're looking at it both from a safety process, but also making sure that whoever is going through the process are going to be secure for a long term.
Great. Thanks, Jacob. So, Jacob, I don't know if you can see on the chat, but there are a bunch of questions. Maybe we can both answer these questions. The first one is from Rebecca.
You know what? Let me, I'm trying to see where I can
There's
see.
a little blue line, and in that blue line, the second icon down, it's a little chat window with 3 dots. If you click on that, then all of the chat will pop up.
Oh, I see. I got it.
We have Rebecca's question. What is immigration fee? Do I need to submit that fee while I am applying for my spouse who's an F1 student visa holder and living in the United States? So, Rebecca, you're able to file concurrently, so you're able to submit all of the forms at the same time. So you'd have to pay the I-130 fee as well as the I-45 fee. So it'd end up being around $1,700. And your situation is exactly what Simple Citizen, the software, was designed for. So if you want help doing it, feel free to go on to start.simplecitizen.com and we can help you through the whole process.
And we have a question for Whitney. Did you say there's another way to get the I-94? Yeah, so there's a website by CBP, and I guess we can post it in the comments, where you can actually log in and type in your passport number, and you can print the I-94. So yeah, there is a way to do it.
Great.
Tom,
thanks, Jacob. And maybe Sam could post that URL here in the chat.
Sam can post it. Can a spouse who reside outside of the U.S. visit while the petition is pending? Yeah, absolutely. So if you're doing the petition through consulate, which means we're not doing it concurrently, then while that 130 is pending, the spouse can come back and forth as a tourist, and there's no issues with that. What if a petitioner, TalkChu is asking, what if a petitioner don't have a passport? If the petitioner does not need to have a passport. It's only the beneficiary that needs it. That's a good question. The petitioner just needs to have a U.S. birth certificate, and that's it. They don't need to have a passport. Nobody can require a U.S. citizen to have a passport to file for their spouse. Hillary, I got married and want my green card to come with my last name changed. Should I fill out the forms with my new name? So there are 2 ways that we see it. So you can do it already with a married name now that you have your new marriage certificate. But and this is kind of my personal thing that I recommend often, is that you keep your name before marriage, the one on your passport, for the first green card, because the first green card is going to be issued for 2 years only, right? And as you get ready for the renewal of conditions 2 years later, you'll have enough time to update your new married name. And the reason we're saying that is because all your documents will have your previous name, and it may cause some delays. So unless you really have to do it, I would recommend to do it only at the renewal of the second green card. When applying for my green card, do I need to send my medicals along with the forms or wait for the interview? So Matt, we talked about it during the presentation. You can do it with the application. Again, it's good for a year. And so, typically everything should be done in a year, or you can bring it with you to the interview. So it's really up to you. But I mean, we always recommend to send it with the case if you can, and that just makes things much more simpler. But you can also bring it to the interview. There's no preference here. Let's see. Do you have a contact? Okay. Sam is answering some questions here. Sam is going to give a call to Neta. Okay, perfect. Any other questions that you see here, Matt?
I think that is everything.
Link here. Whitney, can you give us more info about the interview process? Whitney, we will probably do another webinar just focusing on the interview. The interview itself is a whole an hour of discussion. But I can tell you one thing is that any documents that you collect together after we file this package and we just talked about it, keep it in a box. Put your bills in there, put your pictures, put your any joint documents, put them in a box. You can have them you can have all these joint documents for the interview. But I think we will do one, Matt, maybe in a month or so, just focus on the interview, because I think people want to know what's happening behind those closed doors, and we'll go over the process. We'll give some insider tips, and definitely.
Okay. Last question from Jamie. Just looks like my husband and I are married for 10 months.
And Jamie, all right, here you go. My husband and I are married 10 months. When we apply for a green card, do we get 2 or 10-year green card? All right, so any marriage less than 2 years is going to be a conditional 2-year green card. All right, so you will get a conditional green card for only 2 years because your marriage is less than 2 years. Okay. And maybe, Matt, what we can do is how about if we post an email address, maybe like a general email address where anybody who wants to ask questions for the next 24 hours, we'll be sure to answer them because they came on our webinar. So maybe, let me see.
Great. And
maybe just post.
And we're doing it again on Tuesday. And so if anyone missed the webinar, they missed a part of the webinar, they can hop on again on Tuesday. And Sam will shoot an email in the chat, but it'll be support@simplecitizen.com. So if anyone has any questions, they need anything, feel free to email support@simplecitizen.com. We're happy to answer your questions.
Right. Excellent. Thanks, guys, for stopping by. Well, I just want to mention one thing. I'm gonna say that things are gonna get much more complicated in the next few months with the government, and so Simple Citizen and our collaboration will continue to improve our tools and the support we give our customers, because we want to continue the 100% approval rate. Because trust me, everybody out there who is not going to use our system are going to be seeing much more denials and delays, and we want to fight that. So stick with us and be successful.
Great. Thanks, Jacob. Thanks, everyone, for joining us. And if you want, join us again on Tuesday. Thanks.
Perfect. I'll be there.
Thanks, Jacob.